Cool. Well, thanks for being on the show, and I'm really glad to have you. I've been doing this for a while, and I think I wanted to chat with you, but I know with holidays and everything, it's been hard to schedule it. So thanks for finally being on. Um, what do you want to talk about today? On?
Yeah, and thank you for having me on. I was excited to learn that you had such a show, actually. I had no idea. And even so I found it through your LinkedIn profile,
Mm-hmm.
which I happened to be glancing at.
Okay.
And I realized it had actually been going on for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that actually reminded me of two separate instances of things I've done of a similar nature. And I was just sort of curious about your sort of motivations and how they compared to how I thought about these little mini efforts that I did. And to be clear, like these are projects that I did. Projects is probably even too strong of a word that I knew would have basically zero audience.
Mm-hmm.
The only people that might possibly listen to it outside of the people involved were very close friends and family,
Yeah.
and I think there were some like interesting motivations, some like just stumbling into it. But I can start with the one that and then I'll tell you about a story from actually before that time,
Okay.
and from my college days. So yeah, what I'm referring to there is my crossword blog, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure all of my coworkers, former and otherwise, were aware of. And this was a project that I started actually at the beginning of this year,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that sort of came up by accident. I had a friend from college named Nathaniel who was a pretty accomplished crossword solver. Um, I don't know how familiar people are with crossword difficulty metrics, but essentially crosswords, especially the New York Times crossword, get more difficult as the week goes on.
Right.
So a Saturday crossword will be the most challenging. And I would say anyone that is not familiar with crosswords would have a really, really hard time completing one on their own. And he was someone who could pretty reliably finish like Thursday difficulty and start to struggle later on. And
Okay.
for my part, my skill level was more of on like I can consistently do Tuesday puzzles.
Okay.
And from there, I basically had no chance.
This
Uh,
might be a total aside, but I wonder if this is already true that can you just put a crossword into an analyzer and it tells you roughly the difficulty, or that's not at all possible? Like people do it.
I do not. I think it's just people that do it. I don't
Okay.
think there's a way to, because a lot of it relies on like pop culture knowledge. Like a computer
Okay.
doesn't know how rare, or not how rare, how obscure a certain actor's name is.
Okay.
That's really hard to do. Uh, but anyway, that's all like fairly irrelevant. Basically, we were just talking about a particular crossword puzzle that we had both solved, and we had like strong opinions on. Oh, this is like a terrible puzzle. Like, I just want somewhere to put my like energy about how I did not like this puzzle. Um, and again, this is all like very niche knowledge, but there is a very well established king of the cross world, Rex Parker. Of course, Boston's
Mhm.
familiar,
Of course. Yeah.
who has probably the like daily blog of crosswords. And we both like had our own opinions about the blog. We still read it, but we thought we could do something that offered different perspectives on
Right.
certain things. And so I think it was Nathaniel who originally came up with the idea. It's like, why don't we just, start a WordPress blog, like just put our thoughts out there. We'll alternate every day of the week, and just do sort of like a Rex Parker style blog, but it's our own words and it's our own thoughts. And my initial reaction was like, I yeah, we'll do like three of these and it'll be really funny. Like we'll pretend that this is our new like effort. We're gonna go out on Facebook, advertise it to our friends, be like, hey, everyone please subscribe to our new blog. It's gonna be like the new hot thing. Of course, like we know obviously, first of all, most of our friends don't care about crosswords at all.
Right. That's
Um,
right.
but second of all, even if they did, how likely is it that they will like read it day after day, right? Um, but so I wrote my first one, and I put like a lot of effort into it. Like I think probably spent like 2 or 3 hours, beyond just solving the puzzle, just like trying to
I've
write
seen it.
it.
They're legit
Hmm.
posts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, just trying to write like as eloquently as I could, put a lot of thought into what I liked and what I didn't like,
Hmm.
and I put it out there. And I did my first post and I was like, God, that was so much effort. Like I can't keep doing that. But then, it's my next day, like uh, alternating days. Nathaniel did his post and I'm like, well, I guess I should do my next post. Like like this is my time. And again, it takes like 2 hours of effort.
Yeah.
And time just sort of went on, and I think for almost exactly 6 months, we just kept going. It lost steam near the end.
Hmm.
Like I said, it's one of those things that it's hard to like keep going because
Right.
of how much effort it takes. But
Like
during
first
that
you have to
time,
solve the puzzle enough by yourself to have the
yeah,
opinion, then write it and make like format it nicely and everything. It
hmm,
takes some time.
yeah, and we were benefited somewhat by pandemic times, I think, because
Right.
it's really hard to make like a 2 hour time slot for a certain
Right.
thing every other day. At
Especially if
least
you go on
for
vacation.
mhm.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, like, why am I continuing to do this? Right? Like it takes a lot of effort. Um, I know that people aren't reading this. My mom was probably the only daily reader of that blog. Like I knew people weren't like
That's
consuming
adorable.
this, yeah, in a way that like would would be like providing value to the greater world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think there were several reasons. Like, first of all, um, it's it's one of those like hacks to your brain that like, hey, I'm doing something productive, right? Like
Right.
I'm doing
Right.
I'm doing something that's difficult,
Uh-huh.
um, and requires skill, and is not like immediate gratification. And in that weird way, it like hacks your brain into being like, that was a good thing you just did, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way that like playing video games or something would not give you that same feeling.
Yeah.
Um, at least for me, like there's no guilt associated with it. um, of course, yeah, then there are the obvious things like, it's good writing practice,
Right.
like to sharpen up those skills, I guess. um, and there's also like a weird uh, like self-flagellation angle. Like it's one of those
Are you
things
saying
where
we're
it's
masochists?
I mean, I don't know how much time you put into this. I assume a fair amount.
It takes a while.
Yeah. Um,
Like per
but
episode kind of thing, right? So like I try to do episodes as quickly as I can arrange guests. It really
mhm,
like that is the bottleneck, like getting people actually interested enough to like spare an hour, 2 hour from their time. But
mhm,
it depends. If it's like a video episode, which I've only done a couple so far, they're easier because the video is the content you're watching if you want to watch.
yeah.
And our eyes also forgive auditory pauses if there is a video to go along with stuff.
Mhm,
There you can see like the person thinking something happening. If it's like an audio episode, the editing is a little bit more heavy handed, but then there's no visuals. So to give myself extra pain, I learned Illustrator and animation to like just have some stuff happening on the screen while there's nothing happening, if there's the audio episode. So again, self-flagellation, definitely. I'm not going to be an animator. I don't need animation skills.
yeah. Um, and so one of the things you said, so I I don't know, I guess you can't do this from your end, but I liked to I created sort of a conversation map of how this would play out in my head,
Uh-huh.
and you sort of jumped ahead on my roadmap. But I'm just gonna let that happen. I'm gonna let that pass, and then it'll be a callback. Um, you fast
That's
forwarded.
That's great. You're basically like on the fly DMing the situation because you have like a story.
Exactly, exactly. So, okay, that was my crossword blog, and that's the one that you know about. But I think even more relevant to this was I was actually part of a not podcast, a radio show
No
in
way.
college. Um, yeah, how have you not heard of it?
How have I
What?
not known this about you?
So I went to Swarthmore, and for the
Yeah.
listeners that don't know, that is a very small liberal arts school.
Mhm.
And there was a radio station at Swarthmore, like produced by the college, legit radio, like broadcast over the air, that was run by students. and I happen to know the like guy who did that. You can't find that many people that like actually want to be involved with that. He was the guy that like did the technical part of it. Plenty of
Okay.
people had like shows, but he was like the technical guy.
Okay.
And I was aware that he had this very strange concept for a radio show that he had been doing, um, which was, oh gosh, I can't even remember what it was called, but basically, uh, there's one dining hall on campus, small school, and every Monday he would just get lunch with his friends, a group of like two of his friends, and they would just broadcast that conversation, um, which is a ridiculous
Like
concept for
unfiltered.
unfiltered. Just like it's just the conversation live going out over the radio.
Okay.
Um, like every weird pause, like for someone to go grab food included, every someone comes over and says hi, like, hey, what's going on? All of that, just like that is the show.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
which is such a dumb concept for something that someone would actually want to listen to, right?
That's
Like
bananas in so many ways.
like who would ever want to listen to these sorts of conversations? And that was
Right.
my first like reaction. I was like also I think there's a little bit of judgment involved on my part when I first heard of that. I was like you think you're that important? And like that's a really easy own for every dude with a podcast, right? It's like yeah, of course this dude thinks he's important enough to have his words like
Of
broadcast to
course.
other people. Like that's the easiest thing ever. And of course that was my feeling. And then there was also like a sudden reaction, like doesn't that kind of pollute the conversation? The fact that you like even
Right.
if you don't think people are listening to it, doesn't it pollute the conversation? Like the idea that people might listen to it, so you're like trying
Right.
to be more entertaining or trying to like tell jokes in a certain way. Um, and that sort of like internally bothered me. I'm curious on your take on that, like on that specific point.
So I think one thing I absolutely agree with you on is once you know you're being observed, you're going to behave differently. Like observation can take many different forms. So for
Mm-hmm,
example, if you're literally standing in the public square, it's like the most direct act of being observed. There's a bunch of
mm-hmm,
people right there. If you do something, unseemly, people are directly going to look at you with eye contact, and it's going to be horrible. If you're not a psychopath, you're going to feel bad.
mm-hmm,
But if there's obviously no one, you're in the shower, you're singing, whatever, you don't care. You're going to be yourself. Somewhere in the middle,
mm-hmm,
there's gradations. There's a spectrum. Like if I know I'm being recorded on video, it's much more towards the side of being in public. But if
mm-hmm,
I know I'm releasing a written statement, it's not like it's like less than video. You still feel like people will read my words, but maybe I can add context later. Maybe I can release a video saying like, no, I don't stand by these words. They're more divorced from yourself. So it's a gradation, but I agree. I think let's try to put this situation on that spectrum of like you're sitting there, it's audio. I would
mm-hmm,
say I would definitely feel like audio records a part of who I am. It's not just words. I have to stand by them. So I would behave differently. That's my
mm.
take.
So because it records part of who you are, you like change it. That's interesting. Um,
Yeah.
so so okay. I'll man, you're creating all these callbacks. I I didn't plan for this. So I yeah, I basically yeah, I had that initial reaction, and at the time like I met him, I wasn't like friends with him. It's like I what's even the word? Not friends,
Acquaintance.
acquaintance. There we go.
Right.
I was thinking colleague, and that is not it. But we became friends over that time, and then like I got I got the ticket, I got the invite to the show,
Okay.
and so I joined, and I like the first time I was on, I actually like got it, like I understood what was going on there, and part of it is there's nothing going on there. It's just you're having you're having lunch with a friend with the inside joke that haha, like we have this radio show that technically we're broadcasting it, right? And so like there's always that nice little inside joke that like first of all like there's no video broadcast, so there's plenty of
Right.
opportunities do things that are awful radio, being like,
Right.
oh, look at that. Like, what is that? Not even intentionally, but then you realize it's like, oh yeah, we're all just staring at someone's screen, looking at something over the radio, which is, I don't know, that it's entertaining. Um, but also, I think it sort of forces you to be more invested in the conversation. Um, I
So you
think.
do change.
Sorry, what was that?
So you do like the point here is like,
Mhm.
do you change? Right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I, but I think oftentimes the transformations are useful,
Mm.
and you get to interact with people in a way that you might not always get to, right? Like there's sort of a um, not obligation, but there's sort of encouragement for you to be like expending extra energy in a way that like if you were
Right.
just sitting down for a normal lunch conversation, it's like especially nowadays, like people, maybe you just pull out your phone and it's just nice to be next to someone, even if you're not like conversing with them. But if there's like the pretext of, hey, we're on a radio show, you want to be like thinking of entertaining things to be telling people constantly, which is hard. It's hard to do that on a consistent basis always, right? Like that is just exhausting. But if you just have to do it for like an hour, hour and a half, that's way easier. um, and I
You
feel like
just
that's
described a comedian's life.
I thought you were going to say you just described why I created this podcast.
Um, I think I think you've said I think you've said things which are making me think might not be primary reasons for me. Not that I approach it with like, okay, I'm gonna have richer conversations. Yes, I think I. But even if the conversations I had were not terribly entertaining, I think I still would have been happy with the project. I am happy with
Hmm.
with the project. I think the point you mentioned of you want to be entertaining constantly, I think goes back to how many people's time is invested in this conversation right now. Like if
Hmm.
it is literally just a normal lunch conversation that isn't recorded, it's just you and me, it's two people, and the burden of being entertaining is like you might disappoint me or yourself that you didn't have enough fun. But
Hmm.
if 10 people are listening to this, then suddenly it's like you wasted 10 people's time, or like 1,000 or 1,000,000. So for example, there are some content creators who are really conscientious, who have millions of subscribers, who think about this kind of stuff. I think
Hmm.
Tom Scott, for example, is one of the people that comes to my mind who really thinks about respect the audience, don't waste anybody's time, don't misinform, because
Hmm.
like so many people are listening to me. So I think knowing you, you're somebody who's perceptive and sensitive. So I could see you being very in tune with this kind of thinking, even if it's subconscious, even if you're not literally doing a calculation of how many human hours are going into what you're doing, just the fact that somebody might be listening
Hmm.
makes it that you're like, I want to make it worth their time. That's sometimes how I feel about it, but I wouldn't say it's like a primary motivator, but it's in there, it's in the back.
Hmm. Yeah. And okay, so another thing that I was thinking about, and um, I think it's the sort of recorded aspect of it that I thought was really interesting. So those like recordings were all like there are recordings of those conversations, at least some of them. I don't have access to them, but
Okay.
they exist. And
So they
I
weren't just
probably
live broadcasts. Like this was for
mhm,
posterity.
yeah. And I sort of like, especially at that time, I had like a big fascination with like recorded conversations of myself. Um, and for a few reasons that so okay, I'm gonna take a quick detour and go to callback number one, which was you mentioned that people are more uh, or more willing to tolerate pauses if they have like a video to go along with it. And that made me think, this is not like a direct uh, analogy to that, but when you're on a call with someone, like a video call, are you looking mostly at yourself or are you mostly looking at the other person?
I'm always looking at the other person. If there's multiple people, in fact, in the room, I make sure I have a setup where I can see everybody in an equal size window, so I can observe most of the group. Because that's
Hmm.
what I would do in real life. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, real life, but like in present.
That's interesting. So I've read and I've also talked to people, and so I am usually looking at like 50-50 at myself and the other person.
Okay.
And that's fairly common. A lot of people will like only look at their self. And
Interesting.
hmm and so I started off like almost always looking at myself, and
What? This is
I know.
surprising.
hmm And I was thinking about why I did it because it wasn't like a conscious thing. But it's very interesting to be able to see what your face looks like as you're saying things.
Uh,
Um, because that's not something you ever really get in like real
right.
life conversations. And you get a lot of like real time feedback on like if you're giving someone like a mean look by accident, or if your like sarcastic face looks right,
Okay.
and it's going to come off as like a joke and not whatever.
Okay.
Um, and I actually I had a weird experience. Like I did an interview in my like dorm room one time, and I had like a wall mirror, and it was just a phone interview, like no video. And I found myself like looking at the mirror, and I felt like it really helped me like say things in the right way,
Mm.
in a weird way, like, or at least it like calmed me down. Like it made me like more confident that I wasn't saying things weirdly. Um, and I think that is one of those like weird bits of self-reflection that I've been getting a lot more, because of pandemic, right? Everything's VC.
Hmm.
And
Right.
so you get a ton more time to like analyze your own facial expressions. But while you're doing that, you're not getting the feedback from the other
Right.
person that you're used to.
Right.
And I found that at the end of a meeting, it can be really hard to know like what you did, like if you did something wrong or not, because you're only able to see yourself and analyze like if you were feeling good, and you're not getting like you're not like reading subtle facial cues. Also, like a lot of subtle facial cues are just really hard to read over like
Right.
bad quality video. Um, and so I found like sometimes you leave a meeting and you're like, oh no, like did I sound like a dick there? Like was but like I certainly like if I was the other person in the meeting, I did great, but I wasn't. Um,
That's very
so do
interesting,
you?
Owen. First of all, I didn't know that. I didn't know that
Mhm,
people spend most because I don't know. Like um I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm special, like I'm different. But
mhm,
I haven't even thought of that. I don't. In fact, like looking at myself feels kind of weird to me.
mm,
Um, but I don't feel like I've ever had a time in my life where I didn't know what my face was doing. Do you know what I mean?
mm.
Like I'm pretty in tune with what my face looks like at any given moment.
Before though, I
Oh,
think
you're
that
already the script.
oh yeah, I said I've been surprised before. Um,
Okay.
I think one of the classic ones that I think a lot of people this is not really relevant to my life anymore, especially now that everyone's wearing masks. But on a small college campus, you're passing people that you are acquaintances with, but not really like friends with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a
The head
very
nod
funny.
people.
Mhm. And
Mhm.
well, that's the issue, right? The and that's a really funny thing that I think is kind of specific to like a really, really small campus, because you encounter these situations like 50 times a day, right? Because
Like
there's only
constant.
400, there's only 400 people in a class, 1,600 people on the whole campus.
Right.
You will have seen or at least had one conversation with a huge percentage of that, right?
Yeah. I mean,
And
the undergrad I went to is 400 is the size of the class, 2000 is the size of the campus. So
mhm,
there's
yeah,
four buildings, five buildings. Yeah.
yeah, same thing.
One dining
And
hall.
and the the frequency of those interactions where you're walking one way, someone else is walking the other way, and you're like, all right, is this person a hey? Is this person a like a nod? Is this person a like it's nerve-wracking, especially when like this is a campus full of like socially awkward people, right? Like, and
Yeah.
myself, like I would certainly have included myself in the very socially awkward category, especially when I was at
Really?
school. hmm
I'm
Yeah,
so surprised by that. You seem very comfortable in social situations now, to me
I
anyway.
am now. I am now, but it's all learned, right?
Interesting.
And yeah, that's one of the things you learn at college, I guess. But yeah, the frequency of that, and I had one category that was that category, right?
Right.
And
That's not a
sorry for
radio joke.
yeah, exactly. No, that's a perfect radio one. And
You just made this a video episode just by doing that.
it's all about that one moment.
Yeah.
Um, and I like I don't know. I don't know when I realized it, but I think like and I don't think I can replicate it, but I think whatever I was doing definitely was less smiley than whatever that was. That still wasn't great, right? Like you don't want to be receiving that look, but it was more like
I think
and
there's a
right.
college video that's all just that look. They literally
Yeah.
made a video on that look. But anyway, yeah,
And I don't know, it's one of those things where you like feel like you're doing more of a smile than you are, right?
right, right.
Um, and so it's hard to like self-analyze that sort of thing. And I think that happens in less like extreme versions pretty constantly, right? Especially like I don't know, like sarcasm, especially like that one's a hard one to do, right? You don't
Some
want to be
people are
too
just so
deadpan.
bad at. Some people are just bad at it too. Like that's the thing.
Yeah, some people just can't detect it at all. And
Some people just can't detect it at all. Owen, if you know what I mean.
I don't think that was sarcasm. I don't think like, I don't know what that was. It was not
I know. I
sarcasm. Um, but I think being able to self-correct those is appealing, even if it's not like that valuable. Like the idea that you can self-correct that sort of thing
Yeah.
is interesting. Okay, so
I've
huge
heard
tangent.
to just finish, maybe tie a bow on that. I've heard a
Hmm.
similar story when it comes to other kinds of like bodily functions. For example, your heartbeat. If they
Hmm.
put up like the rhythm of your heartbeat on like a monitor in front of you, and you do breathing exercises, you are, I don't know, like much more able to get to like a number that's like, I don't know, if you wanted to get 60 instead of 80 just
Hmm.
by looking at it. So that, so that's the thing, like the feedback thing is real. So I
Yeah.
can imagine with the face, we're tuned to read faces, so we can read our own face, we never get to see it.
Hmm.
I think it's compelling. All right,
Yeah.
call that one finished.
So what made me think of uh, that whole sideline was I think part of that is why I was so interested in like recorded conversations, right? Um, so listening to one of those episodes after the fact is really interesting because
Hmm.
especially if it's been a week or two, you don't remember exactly what was going to happen. And I find that you sort of your brain I guess you listen to these right
Oh
as
yeah,
you're editing them.
many times.
Yeah. And do you find it interesting like you're thinking like I found like my brain whenever the other person would say something came up with what I would say, and
Yeah.
sometimes it would be exactly the same words and sometimes it would be something completely different,
Hmm.
and sometimes I would be like that would have been more interesting, and sometimes I'm like oh I liked Pasto one better.
Hmm.
um but I think it's that weird like you get to evaluate two versions of yourself like at the same time,
Hmm.
and very subtle differences, like there are completely different ways that the conversation could go. um and I think being able to correct, not even correct, like there's not a correct conversation, but be able to like understand what you're doing in conversations, how you're thinking in a conversation, and like being able to evaluate if something was like more interesting, less interesting, like the right tone or anything like that is super super cool to be able to do to your own brain. Um,
That's such a interesting point that I've never really discussed with anybody before. Basically, all the way up till human speech could be recorded, you could never do the act of like third party observation to yourself on a
mhm,
moment to moment basis.
mhm,
But now you can actually sit down and say like, okay, let me listen to this voice or look at this video, and I will much more be able to evaluate this person as if they're not me, like they're somebody else. And that opens up a whole bank of like information or signals that you might have never had access to before.
mhm. Yeah, and you can be like, uh, I don't know. It's so much easier to be like a neutral, like third party, and
Mhm.
I don't know. There's something like inherently interesting, especially as time goes on, at looking at a time capsule of yourself. Because that's what I like truly feel like. A picture does not really bring me that much nostalgia. It gives like a little bit of nostalgia, but
Right.
I noticed, and it's a silly example, but like Snapchat memories from like 4 years ago. Now that I've been using, Snapchat is so old, right? Like you see
Hmm.
certain things in video form, and you hear yourself saying things, and you're like, wow, that was just 6 seconds. Imagine what I could do with like a full 2 hour recording. Like imagine how awesome that would be to like just dive into. Um, and I feel like
So
that
all
is
of
something that's cool with a podcast like this.
so all of the things you're saying, Owen, make me feel like there's underlying foundation of you almost are yearning to do a frequent time capsuling of yourself, which you haven't done. Like why haven't you done something like a yearly 1 hour essay video to myself where I'm gonna talk to myself for what like 60 minutes and record that every new year or something?
So a video essay is not something I've done, but I do have a Google Doc where I don't know, whenever the mood strikes me, it's probably once every 8 months or so. I will put like as much of my like current thought and like emotional state into it as possible. And the weird thing is I also have this strange like aversion to reading it, not because I'm like, oh, that's gonna be cringe, but because like I don't want to like spoil it for future me, right? Like I don't want to spoil what happened like 4 years ago. Like it's like a fine wine. Like you don't want to drink it like
Right.
2 years after. You want to like really wait because if I read it every year, then it's not going to be interesting anymore.
Oh, that
You know.
analogy is so apt here. It is literally, yeah, it is exactly. You can't keep opening the barrel. Like you're
Hmm.
gonna have to let it just sit so you thoroughly forget.
Yeah, and I don't know. This is probably like a very weird like me specific thing, but I also
No,
and
dude, I feel a lot of these different things, to be honest, since I've been maybe in middle school and I started
mm,
thinking little bit more complex thoughts. I think I've had all of these thoughts since then for sure.
yeah. Um, I have a very specific one in that genre, not a thought, but like a weird habit. I The way I consume music is very weird. Right now, I don't really listen to music very often. I used to listen to music when I was like walking to work or back from work. I found it
Mhm.
distracting if I was like actually doing something,
Mhm.
but I don't walk to work anymore. Uh, but I I always felt like it was too much effort to like continuously be finding new music that I liked. So I would try to find like 8 songs that I liked at one time and just make a playlist, just loop that playlist over and over, same exact order. And it would just get burned into my mind over like a 3 month period. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm tired of that new thing. And what that does to your brain is that it associates that loop of songs or even any one of those songs very strongly with that specific time period and all those emotions that you were feeling. So I felt like that was a really like interesting way to teleport back in time, right?
Mhm.
And so I have a doc like listing some of those like sets of songs and like what they're associated to. And I like refuse to listen to those songs because I'm like letting them age better. Because I feel like if I listen to it now, then it'll be associated with now. I don't. It's too good to use syndrome, right? Like I don't know when I'll ever listen to
No,
music.
no, I I feel like we have parallel habits. So I also do the thing with like generally whenever music discovery is hard. Honestly, before Spotify came along, it was so bad for me. At least with the weekly like randomized list they give you, I can get more stuff,
Hmm.
but it always boils down to like an album or two worth of songs, not from the same artist that I'm listening to that I strongly associate. Not only that, but one thing I was thinking was you strongly end up associating songs with each other that have nothing to do with each other.
Hmm.
So when you listen to one, you will have a yearning immediately to listen to the one that comes after, even though it's not from the same album or anything. It's
Yeah.
more of the same mood, which is interesting. um, there's no reason to associate these two songs together for anybody in the world. You've just randomly like made that happen. You trained yourself
Hmm.
to do that. Very Pavlovian. um, but anyway, in general, what I do that kind of thing with, and I think a lot of people can do that with, is sense. Like
Hmm.
our sense of smell is very close to our areas which with memory and strong emotions, and that means scents are exceedingly good at transporting you back to some time in your past. So one thing that I did, I ran an experiment. The first and only time my wife and I went to Hawaii, I bought a perfume. It's kind of like some tropically scent from a Japanese store, um, and we used it only on vacation. So every day we'd get up, we'd put on that perfume in the morning, go hiking, do all kinds of things in Hawaii. Came back, and then just put it away, and didn't smell it for ages. And then one day, I think it was even more than a year later, I was feeling really down. We hadn't gone on vacation for a while, and I just smelled it a little bit, and it was mind blowing how much I was
Mm,
transported to that morning. Like I was in the hut that we stayed in. A bunch of other memories which had nothing to do with the sense of smell came back. It was great. Quietly, like close it, put it away, and that's now like my thing. Like whenever I want
yeah,
to back in that moment, that scent can do it. But like you said, if I do it like once a year, it works. But if I do it every day, it's gonna go away in a week.
yeah. No, that is such a good idea. And it makes a ton of sense. I think for me,
No pun
what
intended. Oh yeah,
I
that's totally
I knew
okay.
you were gonna go there. I thought I could just keep talking
That
and
was good.
avoid it.
I had to appreciate it.
I Yeah, I have a very strong memory of it was like my junior year of college, and it was like my first time that I had like a single room, um,
Mhm.
so I could actually like control everything in the room, which is like very important to me. I don't know, like like it's not just the privacy thing, although that is big, but it's also just like I just like being able to control if it's messy or clean at on any given day. Like I like not feeling guilty if I have like a tough week and it's messy. I like, not feeling guilty like telling someone else to clean up their mess if I want it clean. All of that. And my big like adult purchase, not at all, but like back then, $10 feels like a huge amount of money. But I bought one of those like Glade air freshener things. Um,
Mm.
and it was I forget what the scent was even called. It was like some wood, something like
Fine,
chestnut
probably,
something.
right? Something like one of those.
No, it was more like it wasn't like fresh scent. It was more
Oh, okay.
like I don't know, like a masculine scent or something like that. It was weird.
Oh, like
Um,
must.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I had my room just smelling musky all the time. That was that was my goal. Um, But I one of the weird things that happens is that if you have one of those in your room and you are in your room all the time, your nose just stops smelling
Right.
the smell.
That's right.
Like it just disappears.
Mhm.
And so I I gradually like kept like they have a dial on like how strong you want it. And it was at the top and I couldn't smell a single thing. I feel so bad for anyone that entered my room. Like it must have been overpowering. I got some comments on it actually, but I'm like, I don't smell anything. It's nothing. Um, but I don't know. Recently, not even recently, like a year and a half ago, I just like still had like the Glade thing, and I didn't have any of the scent packs, and I was like, hey, maybe I'll go out to Target and like see which ones they have, and they had that same one, and I did a little like scratch and sniff, and it was like, wow, like I can remember the exact like fabric on my bed. Like I can remember the exact like comforter setup, like where everything was. I can remember like I just was in the room, and it's so powerful. And yeah, like I should be trying to do that more. Like the music thing works, but like that's even more powerful. Um,
I
yeah.
think chemical markers that kind of work with a sense of smell are so unique that it's not like you're ever going to accidentally smell that smell anywhere else. That memory is so pristine. It's only triggered by a certain molecule, literally.
Hmm.
So that's why I think you can, and with scents like perfumes and such, they're complex. It's not actually a single molecule. It's like a bunch
Yeah.
of different things. So it's going to be really hard for with songs. One thing that I find is they do get polluted in like public settings. If you go to a mall and it's playing a song that
Hmm.
you don't want to listen to, or in the gym, one of the reasons that I use like my big ugly headphones, people are like, you use your cans in public, that's disgusting, uh, is because I actually don't want to listen to the gym music as well. Because sometimes they'll play like these 2000s playlists, and it brings me right back to maybe a time. that I'm like, oh, I don't want to think about that time or something.
Mm.
Um, so, but with scent, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, although I have noticed there's just like once in a while, like in San Francisco, the air will be like just the right temperature. The poop smell will be at like low enough that you can't detect it, and it'll just like bring me like right back to like a fall in on the East Coast, right? Like growing up, because it is so rare to have like that perfect like humidity and like air and just like freshness in a city like this. And it is really nice. Like it just feels great. Because I don't know, fall on the East Coast is a really great season that we do not experience here.
We don't have seasons here.
Hmm. I so okay, to turn it back on you. So do you like see yourself uh looking back or like listening back on these episodes like 2 years from now?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is one of those thoughts that was more emergent than it was targeted. But I think by the time I had done 4 or 5 of these, and I was fairly serious about continuing, like, I think I've been doing this for half a year now.
Hmm.
Um, and I have literally the same amount of motivation as when I started, if not more. It's become more enjoyable. I've gotten better at the process. I've templatized my After Effects workflow. So like I can throw the thing in, edit it, and everything else is work, stuff like that. Um, that I think maybe fifth or sixth episode in, I decided that I was thinking much more about, oh, these are going to be a cool snapshot of my life at a very specific point. But also, because I'm going to be doing this for a while, I'm going to have like a whole story. How often do you get to record yourself? Let's say every few weeks
Hmm.
for years. If I end up doing this for years, I don't know, who knows. But I think it was a thought that developed more than it was a reason to do it.
Yeah, I mean, same for my experiences. Like certainly I didn't look at the crossword blog as something that I would like like as a historical record of myself, and I certainly didn't look at the conversations in Sharples or whatever it was. Sharples is the dining hall.
Why don't you have access to them?
I think I have one of them. I would just have to ask Tobin, the guy who ran it, I think. But I think, yeah, it's one of those things that you like it's really hard to value like future nostalgia in the moment. I think that's really, really hard to do. And I've tried to do it before. Um,
There's a thing in The Office, the last season of The Office from Andy. You've heard that famous quote where he says,
mhm.
I wish somebody told you it was the good old days when it's the good old days.
Possum, you know what's funny?
Yeah.
Uh, I think the last time I heard that quote was in one of our one-on-ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think it was like,
I remember that moment
mhm.
on
It
those
was like,
big couch, ridiculously oversized one
uh-huh.
person couches.
Yeah, and it was like, I was probably 5 or 6 months into working there. And yeah, that is the interesting thing. Like certainly, like there's some things we just can't control for. Like now,
Right.
I guess year and a half or so later, in terms of like quality of life, um, like we certainly my social life is not what it was back then. Um, but I think there are lots of ways that my life has materially improved since then. Um, it's just hard to like, but I still look back on those days with nostalgia, right? Not
Mhm.
like I want to go back to them, but it's like I wish I could experience that like exact flavor of emotions again.
Right.
Um, even times in college that were like really hard, like feeling socially isolated and like workload was really, really tough. Like
Mhm.
like it's like a very it's like you want to experience a cold winter day that's like uncomfortably
Right.
cold. Like
Right.
it's like wow, like that was exactly what I felt like then. I wish I could like bring that back, even though I don't want to be that person again. It's like I
Right.
wish I
Or
could.
either I don't want to be freezing. I don't want to be cold, but
Hmm.
something about the everything in that moment, if I could just feel it for a little bit, will
Hmm.
somehow be comforting. I mean, we can, while we've been discussing this, there's a question that's been looming in the back of my head, which is, I mean, we can talk about the corporate aspect of this. There are whole companies who are basically productifying nostalgia. because, like, Disney being the biggest one probably, because they have been such a part of people's developmental years.
Hmm.
They can, with like a reboot of a movie or with releasing like toys or something, instantly tap into that nostalgia part of everybody's brain. And with Disneyland, it's insane. You can literally be in the universe that you so strongly associated with. So I wonder if they have people at Disney whose job literally it is to reason about how to best tap into nostalgia.
I'm sure, maybe not under that title, but I'm sure that is something that they think about a ton.
Mhm.
I'm lucky or maybe unlucky. I don't know. There's a sense that like so I don't really have any Disney nostalgia. My parents were somewhat anti-Disney. And as I was growing up, so I didn't really watch many Disney movies, which
Okay.
I don't resent them for it. They're like good movies, but it's like whatever. It's just a movie. But like, so I don't like. I've been to Disney World, the one in Florida before, and I had a good time. But it's not like I. That's not like one of my core memories. Like it was just like, huh, I guess I went there. There were some fun things. And so I think going to Disney World now, I think I'd rather go to like a place with better roller coasters or something like that. Um, but I guess maybe
What
I
do you
can't.
what do you have nostalgia for, I guess? What is something from your childhood that you strongly associate with your childhood?
Well, if we're going in the same like vein, I think there's
Mhm.
the Playland Park near uh it's like Rye Playland, like 40 minutes away from where I grew up. And we had school trips there, which is like a school trip to an amusement park. Like there's nothing better, right? Like
Yeah,
going with your family is one thing, but like you're
right,
under the supervision of your family, right? Like
right.
you got to go do like whatever with them. When you're going with your school group, you're just going with your friends on the exact
Yeah,
rides you want to go to. Like
yeah.
you're being animals. Like it's just like like it's one of those like freeing sensations.
I've
So
done
that
that once in my life, and it was really fun.
yeah, yeah. So that's like, and I'm sure if I went there now, like it would just be sad. Like if I just went there and looked at the rides that I was like so happy about, even in like high school, it was great. My friend's mom worked at like Pepsi, and Pepsi would like rent out the entire park, and so
Oh,
she would get us
wow.
tickets to like go in, and literally everything was free. Like this was something I had trouble wrapping my mind around, but yeah, you could just go to the Nathan's and get a free hot dog. You could
Oh
just
man,
reach your hand into the bucket, get a free soda. Like, can you imagine as a kid like how amazing
that's
that is?
insane. That's insane.
So yeah, like that was a great time, but yeah, that's the sort of place that I'm not sure I would want to go back to. But I think
As
realistic.
you were saying this, I thought it would be hilarious. What would be hilarious in very performance art is if you got all your friends together and you went with each other, and you also got your teachers, and they still supervised you.
Oh gosh, yeah, I'm struggling to think of what those teachers are up to now. Some of them must have retired. What are they like now though? It's been like 8 years, 10 years. I don't even know. Um, yeah, wow. Uh, but I think what I have like stronger nostalgia for, and probably wouldn't be as ruined by experiencing it, is I went to for like 7 years. I went to a 4 week sleepaway camp every summer, and
That's a
it was.
strong pattern.
Hmm.
Seven
And
years.
it was one of those places with like no electricity except in like the dining hall. So like you have lanterns in the cabin, like flashlights, all of that. And like none of the activities are related to like technology at all, right? Like it's you're
Right?
playing soccer, uh, you're like playing Magic, The Gathering, like those sorts of things.
Oh, not
And
real magic, Owen.
well, we can't talk
The
about that.
gathering.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I figured, people don't know. Not everyone's,
That's
all of
cool.
the
No, I'm
listeners that have made it to this point, some of them need to have some explanation. Otherwise, they're just going to turn it off. Um, they're confused. I don't know what's going on anymore. I can't listen to this.
explain to the folks at home what Magic the Gathering is.
It's a collectible card game similar to Pokemon, if you're familiar with that. Just very popular in Massachusetts for whatever reason. Uh, but yeah, so this
Uh,
camp, I don't
That
know.
sounds great. It sounds like your parents actually like wanted you to have an upbringing where you had access to just, outside and not technology all the time.
Yeah, plus they wanted 4 weeks of the summer without kids, you know.
Right.
What more could you ask for?
Did you
Uh,
go with friends or by yourself and it was different kids
so
each time?
one of the I went with one of my like neighbors who was like a family friend and I was friends with. He was a year below me, but we were similar in age, just because math. And we weren't in the same cabin usually, but it was nice like having at least one like touch point. But yeah, you're making new friends every summer.
Wow.
Like relearn the social dynamics, all of that. It was interesting though.
That could be stressful too, given you were saying you were socially awkward at that point.
I think it wasn't as bad because like right it's like compulsory friends in a way, right? Like you are in a cabin with 8 other guys,
Mhm.
and there are two counselors who, like, now that I think about it, they were like juniors and seniors in high school. Like I think, like, how were they handling that? Like insane to me. But anyway, two counselors, and like they will do everything in their power to make sure that everyone like gets along, and you will become friend. Like you don't need to worry about like who to sit with for meals. You will be sitting with your cabin. You don't need to
Uh,
worry about, hey, like, do you want to play this with me? Like the
oh, you
activities are
get a
set up.
tribe. You get assigned a tribe. You don't have to
Exactly.
do the tribe building.
Exactly. Which
Okay.
made it a lot more comfortable. Like you didn't, because that's the really hard thing I find about like I don't know, meals, especially like at a new place. Like I don't know, there's something that like feels inherently bad if you like are eating a meal alone like in public, right?
Yeah, I mean,
And
there's a taboo associated with it. I think it's very
mhm,
biological, right? Like, if we think back in the day kind of feelings, it's like, why is this person sitting by themselves? Like, where is their group, right? Who do they belong to?
mhm,
Which, and meal times are when everybody comes together naturally. So, no,
yeah. Yeah, so it can feel super isolating if
yeah.
you like don't have that. Even for
It's the
like really
classic
normal
high school
reasons.
movie trope. Like, everybody walks away from the bench and they're just sitting there by themselves, like eating.
Yeah. And you know what really interesting behavior I observed in the dining hall? I found that at Swarthmore, not at
Mhm.
the camp. I found that people that were sitting alone, almost always they would have work in front of them.
Right,
And that always felt super, super performative to me. Not in a way that I was like judging them for like being performative. Like I got it. Like I understood. Because I didn't do the work in front of me thing because I wanted to like rise above that. I would
right.
just, like not have anything. I thought that was my way of like, subverting the expectation. Like if I didn't have anyone to eat a meal with, I was just gonna eat my meal with myself. No phone in front of me. No, none of this. No watching Netflix. Like I was just gonna be me.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, like because I did feel that compulsion to like prove like, hey, I'm not eating alone because I don't have anyone to eat with. I'm eating alone because I'm super busy, guys. Right? It's like
Yeah, no,
that.
dude, that's such a real thing. I've had meals by myself in restaurants before, especially when I just moved to grad school. I didn't know anybody yet, and my wife was still back in Pakistan. And it's weird, like I would sometimes come across Reddit posts where people would be like, "I would never go eat at a restaurant alone," and I was like, "Why, dude? Like people have never stared at me if I've done that. I've gone to movies by myself. I've done like a lot of things by myself, and I feel like if you just ease up and let yourself be chill in the moment, it's not like people are literally going to like point and like stare or whatever.
Yeah, it's not I I think usually it's not the fear that people will do something to you if you do it. It's the fear that people will think something. Um and oftentimes it's like self-imposed. Like even if you can like rationally say nobody cares, like they're not going to see you again ever, like whatever. It just like it somehow feels like it draws eyes onto you in ways that like I don't know, that feel uncomfortable. But I got a certain like um I I think I've like lost the heart for it, but I think like subverting social expectations in public is like something that I I did like to do. And
In
like
your rebel years.
Well, yeah, like coming out of college, right? Like you're sort of like primed to be like, you know what, whatever. Like I don't care. Like I'll just do my own thing. Like I when I first moved to San Francisco, like obviously I didn't know that many people. And so I would go to like bars alone. Um and not in like a sad way, like I'm at the bar, like barkeep, give me another one, like that sort of thing. But I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to be alone in public in a place that people usually would not be alone in public and
Right?
just enjoy it. Like I had no intention of talking to new people or meeting anyone or any of that. I just wanted to drink a beer around a lot of other people and like see what happened. And like I enjoyed that. It was but it's sort of like you enjoy it in a way that you're like how it's going back to like the cold analogy, but like people take ice baths and stuff like that, where
Right.
you're like gritting your teeth and getting through it, like not that like visceral, but you're like all right, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna sit here. I like you have to like keep your focus. Like it's not just like a pure enjoyment. It's not like type one fun. It's like
Right.
you gotta be mindful of like that you are subverting things in order to like actually like I don't know feel any sort of comfort. It's I don't know. It was a very weird thing, but I've lost my heart. That was one of my 2020 New Year's resolutions to be weirder again because I think I lost that. But I think it's pretty hard to be weird this year.
Oh, for sure. Oh, and like oftentimes I will find myself saying like, I think we're very similar. I think this is one of those times where I feel like we're very dissimilar because I think for me, my family, for example, growing up in Pakistan, um, we were always trying to subvert expectations because we just didn't agree with how people live there. It wasn't even
Mm,
like a matter of, oh, we're hipsters, we're going to do things differently. It was
mhm,
like, I hate how things are here and I want to do them differently. So let's just do them differently. So there's a lot of, I have a lot of stories in my life where I've broken social norms, which some of which I'd rather not have been recorded. Maybe I'll tell you over a beer. But my family was always like, yeah, do things differently, get out of here, like go to a more civilized place. Like, they would literally say that. And we were expected to subvert expectations, which kind of turns the coin on its head. Like when somebody's telling you don't live by the rules, that's a rule that you're now living by. So
mhm,
to me, for example, not being the most religious person, not doing the public displays of being
mm,
religious is a very iffy kind of display back home.
yeah.
For example, communal Friday prayer. Hey, why aren't you going to prayer with everybody?
Mm,
You will literally just be missing in the congregation.
mhm,
That kind of display. But that never stressed me out because it's like, okay, I have validation from my family. Like, what
mm,
more validation do you need? And at that point, it doesn't feel rebellious. It feels like this is just the way to be. And I think I carried a lot of that when I came to the US and lived by myself for a number of years. I felt, I think, literally nothing. I was like, if people want to think something, whatever.
mhm.
And it actually led to some nice bonuses. I remember I went to the premiere of one of the Harry Potter movies or something, and like it was packed. People were like scrambling to find seats, but because everybody came with a family, I found a single seat, like in the middle of the whole theater, like perfect viewing
Mhm.
angle. I was like, this is perfect. Just walked up, watched the movie like a gentleman. Yeah,
I like that your advertisement for a life of subverting expectations is like, hey, I got into a movie.
yeah, exactly. Walked in right at the end. People had been standing in line for hours and got the perfect seat.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I am a big proponent of self-reflection, self-analysis, all of that. I think that if you're not doing that, you should, and it will make your life a ton better. At the very least, I feel like you're the best test subject for yourself, right? Because you're always
Mhm.
available, and you can always sort of like dig into why you did a thing, and sometimes you come up with interesting information. So I think for me, like I mentioned before, like a lot of my behavior is like learned, right? Like you go into college and you're like having trouble meeting people and all that, and you're like lonely and you're like, okay, how do I fix that? Like you can't. I mean, easy to say, right? But like you can't just like wallow in the self pity, right? Like you need to learn what you have been doing wrong, and not necessarily like wrong. Like it's not necessarily wrong to be a certain way, but you need to be able to reflect and like change your behavior in a way that like fits what other people want. Um, And I think that is very important for society to function. I think not everyone can just go out there and do their like 100% own thing, because we need to have at least some like shared code that we live by so that we can all understand that like when someone reaches their hand out, you like shake their hand. And like when someone says like, how's it going? You just say, I'm fine. Like these things all just exist to make our lives a little simpler. Um,
I think for me, it's where you place your sense of belonging.
mhm,
I think the fact that I've grown up in like mega cities, like huge cities, like the city I grew up in is like 15 million people, means that as long and the model was as long as my family is good with stuff, I don't really have to care a lot of what other people think. And I think over time I've extended that to friends for sure, or now even
mhm,
coworkers I would really like. But I think anybody that finds themselves outside of that circle for me, I'm not going to be mean or evil to them, but I don't care what they think, kind of
mhm,
deal. Like I'm not gonna harm them or intrude upon their life. But if they judge me, I really don't care.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that is something that a lot of people like hope to have that mindset. Um, but it is really hard to achieve. And I think like in some ways, like I realized that I like had locked myself down too much, right? I think
Mm,
there is sort of like a way to make friends, right? Like there is a
yeah.
path to make friends. And some
Right.
things like some people you just can't make friends with, like you incompatible personalities. But
Hmm.
I think even if you have very compatible personalities, if you don't know the rules of social engagement and you don't know how
Right.
to approach someone
That's right.
and build that relationship, it can be really, really hard. And things like being able to have like a one-on-one conversation without getting really nervous, which is something that I struggled with a lot. Um,
Mm, okay.
that like that's really going to limit your ability to like bond with that person, even if you would get along if you knew each other better, right? Um,
What
and
did you
so
find changed that for you? Like, how did you go from finding one-on-ones to be nerve-wracking to, I would even say enjoyable? I mean, I really like talking to you.
yeah, no, I enjoyed it a ton. It's I think there's always and again it's all callbacks, but I think part of it is fear of like not having anything interesting to say.
Mm,
Um, and if you don't have a personality, then it's really hard to find things to say. So I
right.
think one thing that is sort of a prerequisite to making friends is having a personality. And like I'll be in in my true estimation of myself, I feel like I didn't have a real personality like going into college. You know, I had things I did and I was funny sometimes, like that sort of stuff, but it wasn't like that's not like enough to like be a unique individual person that is like worth getting to know, right? Um, like it doesn't matter how clever you are or whatever. Like I feel like you need to have something like unique to yourself, like a unique combination that isn't just like Reddit memes and uh, and whatever. Like I think there needs to be something more behind that to like feel comfortable going and like presenting that to someone. Like you have worked your entire life to build this personality. You are now presenting it to someone new. Like you should have something there. Like you should have something to show for all that work, right? Um,
You should not just be walking around talking in Twitch emotes, you mean?
yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's fair enough. Would you say though that at that point in your life, all the people who were in high school with you heading to their own college had a ton of personality? Were you like an outlier?
well, so I would say there's a difference because those people, and I'm still actually very close with a lot of my high school friends. There's a shared history there, and there's a shared like understanding of like we have our own like microculture, right? Where, you know, we know how to interact with each other in a way that's like entertaining for everyone, right? But that's not necessarily going to like translate to a new like random person that doesn't have all that history and background of like, hey, remember that time this
That's the
happened?
question I'm asking you, right? Like divorced of that context that is specific to where you came from. I'm saying when they are in their own college, would people
Hmm.
immediately find them to be much more interesting than you?
I mean, so I'm being hard on myself, but I also think I think all of us changed a fair amount.
Okay.
Um, like over those 4 years. I I think we're sort of like unrecognizable to our past selves, even though we
Mm.
share like a lot of the same like traits.
Right.
Um, I think there has been like stuff added on top that uh like I don't know, changes you. Like it's very easy to not have a personality in high school, right? Like you just play games with
That's
your
kind
friends.
kind of implying, right? That like
Yeah.
if you didn't have a personality at that point, it might just be a function of you just need more years with doing stuff with many people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Um,
cultivating hobbies, man. Some hobbies take time, and maybe some people started on their hobbies early if they had a knack for it, and their parents
mhm,
encouraged, and a bunch of things happen. But generally, for me, Owen, like I started a lot of my hobbies even in late into my 20s or like mid 20s. So I think before that, a lot of my personality was not informed probably by memes or anything, but from the books I read, for example.
mhm.
uh, and yeah, I mean, if the definition of your personality comes from media that can be read by others, you're not going to have a very unique personality. You kind of need to have like a few hobbies clashing together to make you a little bit more unique. And just have
Yeah.
stories, things to say.
Yeah. I think that was because that was always my fear, like going into conversation that like it's even if you do have like a personality and like interesting things about yourself, like knowing how to guide the conversation to talk about
Mm.
those, right? Like having a web in mind, like this is going to like this is how like I can talk about something that I'm interested about because it when you're just talking to a new person, it's and you don't have like those skills, like you're just going to be like, you watch any shows? What classes are you taking? Huh. Those are tough. That sounds tough. Huh. You like any of them? Great. Hey, is you enjoying your food? Like that was my fear. Like
That almost sounded hostile.
and like that like I just did not want to have those type of conversations. I
Okay.
would feel like I was boring the other person because you would be.
Right, right.
And I would be stressed the whole time that like we're not talking about anything interesting. Like why are we doing this? And so not knowing how to like construct a conversation that both people can enjoy, I think that is, I don't know, maybe I'm being weirdly analytical about it, but I do think about conversation that way. Like you're constructing something that both people can have input on.
That's what a good conversation is, yeah.
Well, yeah, but I don't know if people think like I actually don't know. I don't know if people like think about it concretely or if they just do it. I mean, now I just do it, but like certainly starting out, I would like think about like I like my mind would always be churning like during a conversation, being like, okay, we're talking about this that somewhat relates to this thing. Let me say this, and then we'll go there, like that sort of stuff. I would be very, very analytical about it.
I would say people who are in the conversational trade, let's say journalists or reporters or people who are interviewers, for sure think about it analytically. And this is something that has been written about extensively. If you look at literature within journalism, which I haven't been totally trying to read some of that or something to get better at podcasting. But one of the best ways to have a conversation with somebody, no matter what the stakes are, like you could literally be interrogating somebody or trying to get like a high, like actually extract some information. The best way to have a successful conversation is to build rapport, and that only comes from a shared space. Like
Hmm.
one of the things that some people, for example, fail at is just conveying a thought, saying something, and then saying, "Okay, your turn." You know,
Hmm.
that conversational ping pong back and forth. If you just mess that up, you've lost that shared space.
Yeah. So I don't know, like we've had plenty of one-on-one conversations. I don't know, my assessment is that you have a knack for exploring interesting ideas, which, useful that you have a podcast for it now. So do you think you've just always had that, like when you were a kid you were doing that? Or do you think you did ever make a deliberate effort to improve at that?
It's both. So I would say for me, like even when I was in school, when I was very young, like some of my earliest memories have always been that the kind of social role that I would play was like a hub kind of person that knows many different groups. and different groups would interact with each other through me, because I would tend to. It's very rare actually, even since I've been a kid, that I was part of like a group.
Hmm.
Um, it was kind of didn't feel enough. Like I've always liked people. I wanted to talk to a lot of people. So I would know like two people in one group and three people in another and one in another, and they get to meet through me, and that's really good. Over time, I've learned and definitely analytically thought about approaching those kinds of people first. Whenever if I want to make a friendship with somebody, if I've just moved to an area, find the hubs who are easy to get along with, get invited to like one or two parties, like meet the people you like, and then okay, you have your social life going. So I've become pretty analytical about that, specifically as a need, like a survival need, Owen, because I've moved entirely from first, obviously from high school to college. Didn't really share anybody, um, and then going to America, going to three different places now, I guess, and always just having a brand new life. I think that's been really useful. And then when it comes to conversational skill, again, always really liked having one-on-ones. You know, trying to really figure out what the other person is trying to say and ask questions. I think I'm naturally very curious. Um, but now I read about it. I read actual literature that people have written on the art of conversation. But it's never ending. I think part of it also is coming from a family where my father is a storyteller and my brother is also a storyteller. I am steeped in that kind of like thinking deeply about language. So I'm sure there's like colors of that.
Yeah, I am interested in the literature you've read because I or is it at least some of it must be of the form like, hey, here's a conversational trick, tips and tricks to make a conversation go smoothly. Because I don't know, I've always been like interested in the fact that like there are sort of like not universal but like widely applicable hacks to people's brains. Like one of the ones that comes top of mind um, is if you say someone's name rather than just like addressing them directly, that is an acquaintance, they will like naturally like you more, which I found creepy when I noticed people doing that to me. like I like someone just like, Owen, hey Owen, what do you think about that? Yeah, I agree with that, Owen. And I was like, uh-oh. But like I wouldn't have necessarily noticed that if I didn't know it beforehand, because it does feel great to hear your own name and feel like seen by the other person. Is that like part of the literature you're reading, or is it more just
Oh,
like
that's interesting because I naturally do that. I've always naturally done that, but then I've also read exactly what you're saying, and it is part of the literature and saying like, okay, using somebody's name at a frequent enough rate. I mean, this is classic Dale Carnegie stuff,
Mhm.
right? How to win friends and influence
And
people
influence people, of course.
has one of the principles is use their name.
Hmm.
Nothing is sweeter to a person's ear than the sound of their own name, kind of like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
or
but
the
the thing,
sound of themselves quoting that.
or yeah, or
I
sure,
think that
sure.
is the extended version
Yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Dale Carnegie dash pass him big. Like I do the
quote.
double quotes like Michael Scott. Um, but yeah, but the thing is, like, you can feel cringe about it, but it is nicer to do. I think
Yeah,
it's generally just if both people do that, it just makes the conversation better.
no, I think because that's like I don't know, and again, that's part of the appeal of a podcast type thing, or like a radio show, whatever, where like the other person is sort of like naturally going to be on like their best behavior in terms of that, like really like engaged with you in the conversation, and I feel like it just like makes you feel better, right? You're like, wow, like this is going really smoothly, right? Because the other person is putting the energy in to like come up with new things to talk about.
So that's interesting because I wonder how I would feel if one of my friends had a podcast. Hint hint, Owen, maybe you should start one. And they asked me to come on because
Hmm.
one of the things I always find difficult is to sell people on the idea of them being a guest.
Hmm.
Like 80% of people when I pitch it to them are like, I'm not interesting. I don't have anything that I can talk about like an expert. And I tell them like, no,
Luckily, you have a narcissist like me in your circle that just loves talking about himself.
well, if you're on a list of narcissists, there's like 13 people ahead of you. So you're not doing that badly. You're not the first one, Well, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I won't show this episode to John. But for me, it's like have to like literally tell people like, no, you're really interesting. You could talk about these different things. And sometimes it's people like you who are like, no, I actually have a topic in mind which is different than what you're saying, and it is interesting to me. Many times people pick up on the topic that I suggest as well. But I do find this exercise puts people a little bit on edge. Like, I
Mm,
need to perform. I need to, and I've told them, dude, no one's listening. Don't worry about it. But callback of actually making it recorded puts this extra pressure on people, to the point that some people don't even want to be on it. Like,
mhm.
I'm just not interested. Like, I'm just not. I don't know what to say.
No, I totally understand that, and I mean, like it helps that I've just like done this sort of thing before, and so like I feel
This is a
like
step down because this is not live on the radio.
that's true. I think if anyone was listening, the FCC would have gotten us. You are definitely not allowed to transmit some of the words that we did over the air, but
Hey, HBO can do it. You can do it.
I don't think that's how radio works, unfortunately. They're real strict over there. Um, but yeah, I think it is, and I think it also is like the same sort of feeling that I was having, originally. It's and actually, so going back to like my weird like metamorphosis in college, it's uh one of those feelings where I like going into a social situation where I don't know the rules is terrifying to me. Like
Hmm.
I like I like the first time I went to like this like board game night thing, like I literally like it was so nerve-wracking. Like, it's just a bunch of nerds playing board games, but
Right,
like
right.
I hadn't experienced that social situation. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know like, hey, do you just like go to whatever game you want? Do you have to like talk to people first? Like you just don't know what's happening. Even if like logically you can be like, well, if I mess it up, like who cares, right? Like they'll just tell me what the right thing to do is.
Hmm.
I literally like circled I was just like pacing, circling the building that it was in, like because I was just like, okay, I just gotta I just gotta think this through, understand the situation. And I feel like part of that is the same thing with one-on-one conversations. If you haven't done that a lot, right? Like in high school, right? Like a lot of my interactions with friends would be in a group setting.
Right.
And even if I could have a one-on-one conversation with them, that's like a very specific person that I already know. Um, and uh and so like if you're walking into like a podcast situation, like you don't really know the rules necessarily, right? Like you
Mm.
don't like like it feels very possible to like mess it up. Like this person
Right.
had a good recording going and like they had a good thing going, and I'm just not going to be a good guest, and I'm not going to know like how to respond to what they say, and they're just going to have to toss out the whole recording. And like I understand that anxiety. um Even like it doesn't matter how logical you are about a social situation, it's like a deep part of your brain that's very hard to hack, is how I would
I mean,
describe
that makes sense to me because if you look at realistically the situations that our ancestors could be put in where you would be in that kind of mental state, it would not be a fun situation. It would be like either interacting with a completely new tribe or yourself having been exiled or something like really dark and not fun kind of thoughts.
it.
um, because we have so many people now, we can just you can constantly be like in between tribes and not really know where you belong and what the rules are.
Hmm.
And I've personally had some pretty terrible social interactions, even though, Owen, again, we're dissimilar, so I don't feel that kind of anxiety.
Hmm.
And if something really goes bad, I'm like, all right, I guess that wasn't fun. All right, I'm gonna bounce. I'm gonna go somewhere else. So when I was in grad school, in my first month, I went to the sort of all of the different clubs, student clubs, run their own. All new students welcome. Come hang out for 30 minutes, and we'll tell you what our club is about. Kind of meeting. So I went to a lot of those, and 80% were terrible. Like, the people were not welcoming. They were
Hmm.
really into their hobby. I think the worst, literally the worst one, was the anime club where I walked in, I said hi, nobody said hi back. They just kept watching their anime, and it was like in a dingy basement. Uh, and they were watching some weird, I don't even know what it was. I just walked out. I was like, all right, that was that was a miss.
That's actually really funny because I can imagine, because like what's happening there, from my perspective, is that they're not like mean people, but
No.
they're experiencing the awkwardness from their end. They're like, oh my god, there's this new person. Like, I have to be the one to say hi? Like I don't want, like I can't do that. Like I can't have a conversation with this person. So there's like someone else will, and they're all like staring at the screen, just feeling
Yeah.
more and more uncomfortable as time goes on, which is just hilarious. Like, and that's the thing. I like I so much logic goes into this because like I know that any awkward situation that I find myself in is a great story, like in the future, right? Like I know that if I mess it up, that's going to be a hilarious story, right? Like because
It's
you get to be the butt
material.
of your own joke, which I think that's the funniest kind of story. Like I did something so stupid, you're not going to believe this. And but still in the moment, like I've tried as hard as I could to be like accelerate that funny cycle, like the from the pain to the joke. I've gotten it, like depending on the situation, I can get it down to like a day or two. But like the true transcendence is if you can do that in the moment. Like
That's what I was gonna say. That's how you should feel about it. That really, I'm genuine. Like, I think that's generally how I feel about it. But you really, if you can, I sometimes find myself even finding it humorous in anticipation. Like, you can sometimes see the train is gonna hit you before it has hit you, and it's like a few seconds before you're like, oh, this is gonna be terrible, and it's gonna be hilarious.
Yeah, no, I 100%. The thing is though, like 2020 is probably the most barren year for stories of all time, right? Like anybody that I'm interacting with, I mean, yeah, sure, I've met new people virtually, but I don't know, it wasn't awkward at all. They were just like nice people, and so it's like if I'm not going out and interacting with new people on a regular basis, where will I get my like I had this awkward interaction story. Like I feel like awkward interactions just don't happen that often when you're in an environment like this. I don't know if you feel the same.
No, I feel exactly the same because I think the rules are simple, and
Hmm.
they're pretty well enforced. And the fact is that there's this natural distance from the other person. Like the screen takes away the cringe, really,
Hmm.
because I don't even know, man. Like I don't fully feel like a person is in front of me when I'm talking to them
Hmm.
on a laptop, because
Yeah.
so the regular rules of a person, for example, not that I've had a fight with anybody, but let's say tensions were to get raised over video, you could just like shut the video. Like there's no real threat of the other person like actually hitting you, which
Yeah.
just the fact that that's gone means the situation is like completely different. How many other things like that I can't immediately think of get erased, that it becomes a completely different kind of interaction for me. Not to mention, you said earlier, like people are spending a lot of time looking at their own face, so that's giving even less time to the actual connection happening between two people. So yeah, I think it's more information lossy than people even think it is.
Yeah. Like if you imagine like it feels like you said much higher stakes, even if there's no like logical threat or anything like that. It just feels much higher stakes when you're in the same room. And also there's like all sorts of weird like navigation, like even micro stuff, like oh, who's going to leave the room first, or things like that, or like hey, what if you're walking in the same direction after like you end the meeting, and stuff like all those sorts of micro considerations you just don't have to worry about anymore. And it
Mhm.
is very much like you are just it's almost like a text conversation just with a little extra tone, which it's weird. I think we're all going to be, not that this is a novel thought, but we're going to be super socially awkward once we start. Like, when, when's the last time you had a like mask off in person conversation with someone that you don't know very well? Like, it just doesn't happen, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
Mark.
talked to the, yeah, yeah. So like we all these skills are atrophying like crazy, and it's not just going to be like one weird person. It's going to be both people don't know what's going on. Like I don't know. I feel like it's just going to be such a nightmare. Like I think like I'm looking forward to it, but like considering like I have not had a single awkward interaction all year. Like, obviously not 100% true, but like that's what it feels like. Like whenever I get the vaccine, it's full on awkward. Like I'm gonna be making up for last time. I'm gonna have so many stories. I'm so excited.
That's such a weirdly optimistic way of looking at things, both finding a silver lining in the pandemic, like lack of cringe, and then also post pandemic, trying to get as many stories as possible. Like, yeah, even small things, right? Like, for example, as people were leaving the company for new places, right? For example, when I was leaving, I would have had a happy hour. It would have been a lot of people I know, not many people you know. You're
Hmm.
gonna be there, and you're gonna have to talk to like 10 to 15 different people that you have no idea, and the conversation is like, so you know Basim as well, right? Cool, cool, cool. Like that.
Exactly, right? Like trying to like starting from zero, especially like if you have nothing in common with other person. Like it's one thing if you're like close friend, like yeah, the people that I've met, like they're close friends with one of my close friends, right?
Right.
Like it's
Yep.
pretty easy to start from there. But if
Yeah.
it's like yeah, like I've like no relation with this person and like they're like 35 and like doing their own thing in life, it's like this is going to be a tough one because like you can't get weird with it in the same way. Like I like if someone's my age and I'm just meeting them and like I'm gonna have to like talk, like I like getting weird with it. I like getting meta on the conversation and all that. But it's hard to like take that risk with someone that you like don't know how they're gonna react to that sort of thing.
Yeah. Plus, there's social consequences immediately because you don't want the person you know who is the shared person you know to think you're weird, right? Like, you don't want this person to go back and tell them, like, hey, that friend of yours is blah, blah, blah. And suddenly you're different in this person's eyes. I think there's that pretty real kind of social consequence attached.
Plus, I mean, and this is another big thing. Like I personally, like to this day, I still don't like group conversations as much as like one-on-one because there are so many more variables.
Right.
Like figuring out when it's your turn to speak, if it's more than like three or four people.
I so
Um,
agree with you. I don't like group conversations,
yeah,
period.
and also like in like a more party setting, like unless you're just like talking to people you already know, like the exiting conversation dance is so hard because that was the worst thing ever. And I mean, it's partly like my fault, but like if you ever go to a party in the Bay Area with people that you don't know, like how many times do you need to hear the question, so where do you work? What do you do?
Yeah.
Like, just soul crushing. And like I know that that is such a natural way to start a conversation and like I'm not innocent of it, but it's just like one of those things where you just like you feel like you're like treading water just trying to like your motor is sputtering just trying to get something going there. um
Hey,
it
you know what?
and
Even though I don't like group conversations, I think I'm really good at them because I don't. That is a no ask question for me. Like
well
the
it's
where you
not
work
it's not up to you, boss, and people will ask
often.
it.
No, people can
People
ask
ask.
you, but I'm not gonna ask it. I'm saying, like, I'm gonna guide the
Yeah,
conversation towards something more interesting than that.
yeah,
You
but
can
the
take
thing is,
control, right, Owen? You can just
yes, but the thing is, it's hard in a group setting where it's not like everyone's just sitting down at a table. There's the ability to leave. I think that changes
right,
the dynamics a ton
right.
because it means that you are not only are you trying to decide like where to take the conversation, but you're trying to decide if it's worth your time to invest in that. Um, because you have the option to not, right? Like, sure, if I'm just sitting with a random person and if they start with that question, that's fine. Like I can like if I'm going to be there for an hour, like that's fine. I'm going to invest in making sure that this hour doesn't suck, right?
Mhm.
But then there's the other consideration that it's like, well, okay, I would have to put some energy into this. I could just be like, okay, I'm going to get another drink. Right? And I think that changes things in a weird way
Yeah, it's
because
a
the other
no
person is
guilt
also
way
doing
out.
it. What did you say?
It's a zero guilt way out, right? Like, yeah,
Mm.
go get another drink or go get another, or oh, I see my friends, or I'm gonna go say hi to whatever.
Do you like how I leaned in even though the sound was coming from there?
And I'm not literally physically in the machine either. So the
Yeah.
if anything are like more near your lap as opposed to like, in my face.
Well, at least that makes me feel good because I know that not all of my like instincts have vanished.
I
Right?
think you're gonna. I'm maybe more optimistic than you. I think it's gonna be like riding a bike. I think it's gonna be like a day or two of awkwardness, and then it's gonna be partying and concerts, and people are going to be crazy. Well, it's going to be slow rollout. It's not like everybody's going to get the vaccine on the same day, but snapshot comparison 6 months. So I think it's going to be fine.
Yeah, but I think the big issue is that people's friend groups are going to be completely different post pandemic. Because I think the people that we are spending time with right now, at least for me, is a very different subset of the people that I was spending time with in person. Because there's no physical barrier,
Right.
like I can be
That's right.
close friends with anyone in the country, right? Where it's much harder to do that physically, right? Like, am I really going to spend like 5 hours on a Saturday playing games virtually with some friends in Atlanta,
Mm.
when I could be like doing something face to face? Um, and the answer is sometimes, but definitely not every weekend, which is what I'm doing right now.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think because of like locality being removed as a variable from friendship, it meant that it was a lot more about, okay, who do I want to hang out with, regardless of where they live. And
Hmm.
you can be, I guess, more picky, especially if you have many friend groups. You can rotate. You can do many different things. Give a lot of people like some of the time as well.
Hmm.
But once locality is back, forced, I guess, socialization is back. Like for me, sometimes like I love socialization,
Hmm.
but I still need a break. Like I can't, for example, I can't live in a house where I have a roommate in the room and there's housemates all like I need some time of the day when it's just me.
Hmm.
And not in the bathroom, like just actually in a living space.
No,
And
I all right, continue.
no, go on, go on.
No, so I definitely feel that it's like I definitely need to have time where there are like no eyes on me, even if I'm not doing anything, like I'm just watching YouTube or something. But it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it's not relaxing if someone else can like see me, right? Like I just like it's I don't think there's necessarily like a logical reason. It's just like it takes some amount of energy to be a human that is being seen by another human. And
Yeah. No, you're exactly right.
so that was my thought on that. I
It,
just like
it's if you're just by yourself, that is absolutely your lowest metabolic rate. Like being seen by somebody at least switches you into not your most idle process, like
mhm,
something extra.
yeah, yeah. I think laughing counts. I think I win.
Oh, okay, okay, sure, laughing. But that's easy because like I laugh all the time, so you know that.
Mhm.
That was gonna be hard.
For
Um,
some reason, like my eyes were tearing up like it was a staring contest. Like it,
yeah,
it
your
just felt like
anything, your instincts have sharpened during this time.
it's like you got a high alert. I think it's also like again it's like all the feelings of like holding your breath or like gritting your teeth. You're like, all right, I'm gonna do this. Like, and that's the worst part because you can like self look at your own face during that. I don't know if you
Right.
were taking the opportunity, but you're
Dude,
like, okay, I got it.
I haven't seen my own face since the call started.
You're missing out. I've seen it 50% since the call started.
Wow, your face is getting 150% of screen time. That's great.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Put that on your Google
That's like
metrics.
three listeners already.
Yeah, that is true. I think yeah. So if you've noticed a sharp uptick in your viewership on YouTube, that was me. I think I listened to 0.75 full episodes. So
What did you think?
I think it's interesting. I think it's so actually what I don't know because again I like being analytical about it. I think
Sure.
the like what makes it engaging for a listener is a combination of two things. One is like where a listener is looking for you to be engaged in the conversation and like I mean and I think the premise of the show makes it hard on you. And I think you are always engaged in the conversations, but I think it also requires you to convince the viewer to be engaged in a thing. So I'm not going to like
Mhm.
name topics, but there's certain topics that like I just hear it and I'm just like, you know, you listen for 5 minutes and you're like, yeah, I don't know if I can get myself to be engaged in this. Um,
Mhm.
and so I thought about that a bit. And then I also was thinking about how uh, a story is such a good way to introduce someone. I was listening to the Diego one, uh,
Oh yeah.
and I think it's just if you're looking to grab someone immediately, it's really hard to get someone like right from the get-go, like talking about something that they're interested in without like a preamble, like this is how I became interested in this. And with Diego's, it was entirely a story essentially,
Yep.
um, which is great. But I think at the very least, like I don't know, humans are hardwired to like look for a narrative that they can latch onto, and then from there, if there's
Mhm.
more like interesting things tacked on, then that's like they're already invested a little bit, because like a story, you listen to the first bit and you're like, okay, there's gonna be something here,
Mhm.
um, and I didn't really construct a story, and unfortunately, I didn't have time after I had that thought. But I don't know. I was just thinking about the mechanics of why I was interested in certain episodes and not in others. I don't
So
know.
I
This
think
is
both
thinking.
kind of conversations have their place, and I think you're
Hmm.
exactly right. Like, if you were to ask me which is the most quote unquote thrilling episode, I would say it's the episode with Diego, and the reason
Hmm.
is it's much more like a standalone story. There's a
Hmm.
compelling protagonist in the form of Diego and his roommate, and the main thing is that the story is exciting. It is an exciting story, and it's one story. Whereas most conversations tend to fall on it's a hobby, you've engaged with it. So as a result of that, you'll probably have a few interesting stories to tell, which will be peppered throughout the episode. For example, the one I did with Wendy Lynch talks about being a triathlete
Hmm.
and skiing. So there's some stories in there about like what it means to do that kind of crazy thing, like run 2 marathons in a day, which
Hmm.
are like 5 to 10 minute long stories, very compelling to listen to.
Yeah.
But could probably fill a whole podcast if it was like a niche podcast about just that thing always. So you go
Hmm.
into like the gritty, but that's where they fall. But I also really like meta level conversation like this, where because of the very fact that we're analyzing the act of conversation and it's unplanned, we're on the fly building the conversational tree with each other, just seeing
Hmm.
where it goes, how it goes, and that's a fun exercise. Doesn't and that by definition excludes the narrative. Like this won't be fun if it's scripted.
Yeah. No, and I think it is fun to play the conversation game. I think you shouldn't always be doing it, otherwise nobody will like you.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know. I found I don't know, with my conversation with Tim, I felt like we were both like playing the conversation game, which I don't know. It's just like an interesting thing to come across, um, where there is like a meta thing going on, even if you don't discuss it. And I think that can do interesting things. It's exhausting to do all the time though, and also is like probably sociopathic in certain ways. Um,
I mean,
but
I don't know. Like you can learn lock picking just because you're interested in locks, not because you want to rob somebody.
yeah, and you can learn law just because you are interested in law.
um, so yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it can be exhausting, and it can definitely be off-putting, especially if the other person is not up for the game.
Yeah.
Uh, and that can happen. For example, I wouldn't just walk up to a random stranger I don't know at a party and be like, "So, conversation, isn't this a whole thing that we have to do this?" Like that, it's a high risk play.
Oh,
They
I've done that before. I think it's really funny.
It's a high risk play. You might really, if you hit it off, you have shortened so much of your initial
Yeah.
dance with each other. You've just skipped a lot of it because you're just like, okay, you're cool.
Hmm.
Uh, or it might just crash and burn. It might be like, haha,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is the interesting thing. And it like I think that's what like got me into like having one-on-one conversations with people. Like the idea that you could like if you do things in a weird order, like you ask like more personal questions than you usually would,
Right.
um, it's more interesting for both of you. And you like, yes, some people won't be up for it. And it takes a lot of energy. Like the other person needs to be willing to like be looking for that, which I don't hold it against someone if they're not. What
Hmm.
I've found though is that especially in a party setting, if someone is feeling like more left out, like you read the body language, I feel like that's like the perfect time for that.
Yeah.
Um, and it's the perfect time to like reach out with like more depth than like because it proves to the other person that you're willing to actually spend time with them. It proves to the other
Hmm.
person that you're not just like talking to them to talk to someone, right? Um, I don't know. It's like a weird thing. It's a weird skill that I have like no use for at the moment. Which I think is funny.
There's a lot of skills that I don't have use for at the moment, like walking around.
Yeah, exactly.
But Owen, I asked you this question before as well. Maybe I'll revisit it again. Like, why aren't you doing something on your own that at least has, an element of recorded conversation, whatever the project is?
Yeah, I mean, I so for the crossword blog, I did. This was kind of like a laziness thing. It takes a lot of time to write something eloquently.
Why not stream yourself solving it?
Hmm?
Why not
Film
stream
myself
yourself
solve. Oh,
solving it?
stream myself solving it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the sort of thing that is interesting. Yeah, I think part of it is just like not feeling like getting it set up. Uh, but it would be the sort of thing that like I I am in theory interested in, right? And I think there are a lot of things in my life. I think the human brain sets us up for failure on a lot of things. Um,
What do you mean?
I think we're hardwired for like short-term happiness, even like to an insane degree, right? It's crazy to me that a highly regarded piece of advice for human beings that is not just like obvious is like, hey, if there's some like chore or task that takes less than 2 minutes, just do it now.
Right.
Duh, obviously, but we still don't do it. Like it's ridiculous because like I found myself like today, I was like, and like I was like coming back from like getting groceries and like I put stuff away and I'm like, well, I really want to like play a game of Hades right now. Like that sounds fun. But hey, the table is a little messy. Like there's some crumbs here, and like I want to like wipe down the stovetop and all that, and that takes like 90 seconds, and I had to
Right.
like convince myself, yeah, you should do that now. Like I had to like my all of my natural inclination, all of my brain was like, yeah, just go do the insta fun thing, and like I did the 90 seconds and I felt great. I was like, wow, I accomplished something. Like my brain was setting me up for failure so hard that it didn't want to spend 90 seconds to get to a non-local minimum. Like that's ridiculous to me. Uh,
And not only that, it immediately demands an out of proportion payment for what just happened. Like, okay, I did that for 90 seconds. Now I deserve to play games for 90 minutes.
exactly. But that's what I mean. We're hardwired in certain ways that make absolutely no sense for our own personal happiness, even not just like logically, like oh, we do irrational things, like
Mm.
whatever, that's fine. We do things irrational to our own happiness, which is like the thing we're optimizing for, which is
But no,
crazy to
but
me.
we're not. But we're not optimizing for happiness, right? We're optimizing to replicate
Uh,
ultimately. And
explain more of that.
I mean, mainly biology is geared towards making more copies of yourself and
Hmm.
want like basically have to reproduce. And that sometimes might align with happiness, sometimes might not align with happiness. And definitely the algorithm that's running is a greedy algorithm, which is like
Hmm.
if I can do something that gives activation to my reward systems, which most of them are driven by like if this is immediately going to be good for releasing a pleasurable amount of dopamine, I'm going to do it.
Hmm.
And most behaviors generally at the human level can't be explained that easily because they're quite complex. You have a lot of different things, context, blah blah blah. You're not literally, you don't approach every situation with like that in mind. But there's definitely an element to that. Obviously, for simpler life forms, it's literally whatever makes them reproduce themselves.
That is interesting because in my mind, um, like dopamine and whatever other neurochemicals. That's like the carrot on the stick that our body uses for all of the things
Mhm.
that it wants us to do, and not all of those are like reproduction related. And
Or stay alive, right? Like
yeah,
survive or
yeah,
reproduce.
yeah. Um, and I think we like our job as humans to some extent, not the whole job. I'm not going to speak on morality and all of that, but
Mm.
is to sort of optimize our brains to make that carrot on the stick happy and like for us and others around us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think one of the great ways we can do that is like rewire our brains to do things in a way that makes more sense for that carrot on the stick, right? Like, you know,
Mhm.
I know that if I do a chore in a nice way, then I'll get a reward. So like, but I have these competing systems that are like, okay, do the thing that will get you instant satisfaction. Like there's this instant gratification over here. That's gonna that's gonna like take you down a little, and then maybe like whatever. And that's like my natural instincts are to do the easy one.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know. I feel like that's like stupid on my brain's part, right? Like it should recognize, and like I have to train it to recognize that delayed gratification is a real thing.
I mean, this is the thing, right? Like ultimately, this is the weird thing about evolution in general. You're always, people say it's like a half explanation because you're always explaining after the fact. Uh, but it's a little bit like the anthropic principle. The fact that we exist today means however we behave was the best way to behave when you needed to reproduce or make more copies of yourself, like 100,000 years ago,
Mm-hmm,
in the environment that our ancestors were in. So today, when the environment is completely, like magically, unimaginably different from what it used to be then, all those systems or like small pieces of like code or routine that used to run back then are still here, and they're completely mismatched with our environment, not to mention completely mismatched with emergent things like philosophy and morality and these other things that, like, were never really the goal or the target of the evolutionary process,
mm-hmm.
but it's a side effect and it's here now.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no natural like. I mean, you know, maybe back 300 years ago, there's a natural reason to prefer like cleanliness to uncleanliness, but I'm not going to get like botulism from some crumbs on the table, right? Um, Part of it is like social signaling, right? Like you gain some like tangible benefit from other people knowing that you keep
Right.
your apartment clean.
That's
Um,
right.
but you know that's not really that relevant these days. Nobody sees my apartment. For all you know, I could have the biggest mess in the world right over there, right? Um, and sometimes I have been like doing laundry, and I put the I don't even know what it's called, but the background on so that you can't see what's in the background.
Oh, I see. I
Um,
see.
but I don't know. I don't have fully formed thoughts on that. I just think it's interesting. I was experiencing that today, and I'm like, wow, like that was such an easy thing to do, and it made me feel good. Like, why don't I do that more often? Like,
I mean, again, that's what I'm saying, right? Like, what is the biological process? It's gradient descent. Really, it
hmm
is. Because at any given time, you're doing small changes and just seeing whether if the result is better or not. And we know that obviously doesn't always go for the global optimum. So the process is not that smart. It's always about what delta can I do to get slightly better than the
hmm
way that I am right now. And yeah, I mean, all of our obviously, our machinery was not written. It's funny though, like, yes, the way we were constructed was not super terribly smart, but we are better than the process that created us, which
hmm
is almost magical. Like, where did the universe just come up with that? Is that a total accident? Does that happen a lot with life? Um, yeah, but that's completely off topic now. But yeah, kind of related, I guess.
I think we've been off topic for quite a while. I think, yeah, no, it is incredible to me that I don't know how much you've read on like how the vaccine was created,
Mhm.
and what it's doing, and how we're essentially printing molecules in
That's
a
right.
way to make our own cells produce proteins in a
Hmm.
particular way to trick our immune system to preventing us from catching this actually danger. Like, it's insane to me how much human knowledge and human ingenuity went into that process, and like how much
Mhm.
we have learned about our own bodies that we can actually hack our biological systems to do that for us. That is
Mhm.
so incredible. Like, think about, if a tree has like a rampaging like insect infestation that's ruining the population, it's just over for them. But we
It's
have
dead.
like, yeah, we have passed beyond that barrier. Like, we can, I don't know, that it's just so incredible to me that we have so
It
much
is.
knowledge that we can save ourselves from that. Um,
I mean, to get at the heart of the feeling you're describing, I think there's tons of moments that happen during the day, during the course of life, where I just stand back and I realize how magical the thing happening in front of my face is, but how just used to it I might have gotten because of it always being there or not thinking too deeply about it. But the vaccine is definitely one of them. Even the fact that we're speaking right now and this is just magically getting recorded, like the internet obviously is the big revolution of at least um, my life and the time that I've been here. I went from somebody who grew up 5-10 years no internet, and then actually experiencing getting online. It's insane what's happening, and it's extremely non-obvious to a lot of people how recent it is.
yeah, I think the the fact that like, I don't know, interfaces as a concept are like, I feel like have driven so much human progress. Like, the
Right.
idea that, okay, we solved this problem, we're going to make it easy to
Mhm.
interact with this thing, and then we use that thing and this thing
Yeah.
to solve a
Yeah.
problem, and it's turtles all the way down. It's insane to me like how much is going on for any single thing, and
Mhm.
it's impossible to fully unwrap. Like, we solved like food consumption, right? Like you just go to a store with this abstract idea of money to
Mhm.
acquire food for yourself and subsist. Like, we have abstracted food out of our life, out of like as a concern, which is insane to me. Um, and I don't know, that is like every single thing that we interact with had like a billion different genius solutions behind it. Um, but yeah,
I feel like the same conversation probably has been had by like some entrepreneurs or people who are starting companies, which is like, are apps just abstractions of like problems that didn't have solutions for before? And like this, basically this phone is like an extension to ourself now, where we have this interface that has solutions for regular problems, and you just go there and you kind of just solve it.
hmm
um, so food obviously is a big one, and food delivery, or even on top of grocery and whatnot, is just the ultimate in solving a problem. Like I click a button and somebody hands me a meal.
yeah,
It's
yeah. Not
what?
even anymore. You click a button and then like 45 minutes later, there just is food outside your door, and it's what you wanted to be eating. And like,
Dude, it's Star Trek. Only the fact is like the moleculizer takes like 50 minutes as opposed
yeah,
to
yeah, it's just a really complicated one. Um, but
you
yeah,
build a city.
but yeah, like all the Star Trek thing is just an abstraction of that process, right? Like, it's
Right.
um, I don't know. That's the sort of thing you could just talk about and being like, "Whoa, dude," for forever. I'm sure. Like,
And
because that's the thing. It's so universal. Like, any single thing that you point at, that
yeah,
you can "whoa, dude" about it.
I mean, you can, but I think again, I'll go back to some numbers that at least do make it more a data-driven voodoo for me, as opposed to just like, oh, let's smoke weed and think about trivial things as if they really do. Because if you look at the amount of time humans have been around, the experience has been the same for 99.9, I don't even know how many nines. And even within that rise of civilization, everything in the last 10,000, like 12,000 years since agriculture, even within that, it's been another microcosmos of like same life. Like your grandpa did the same thing your grandchildren are do.
hmm
And literally just the last, I don't know, 3 generations. So that is surprising to find ourselves in that kind of cusp in history is interesting. I think it's not. I mean, it is random. There's no reason for it, but it is remarkable.
Yeah. I don't know. I do try to appreciate it. It's one of those things where like I don't know. I guess it's called mindfulness if you're into that. But
What's
I
the
don't know,
word
just
you?
mindfulness.
Oh, mindfulness. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But just yeah, trying to appreciate like your actual existence and not just experience it. Um, I think is interesting. It's hard to do consistently, at least.
You would be
But
surprised how many people do that with food, where they don't fully appreciate a meal because they're just
uh,
literally thinking about something else the whole time. And it's much
mhm,
more like mechanical process of chewing than like savoring each bite.
mhm. Yeah, and sometimes that's what you want. You just want to turn your brain off. Having your brain on is constantly is probably not the play. I guess we've had this conversation before.
Oh yeah,
You
and
you
Yuhan and me.
yeah, you always have
Yeah.
some sort of thing going on in your brain, and I do not. Sometimes it is just purely blank, um, which I don't know. That's another. I think we do have to wrap this up eventually, but
Oh, dude, I didn't even notice. I haven't looked at the clock once. That just, I did not expect that 2 hours and then my what?
you know what the timer was? So I'm sitting at an angle to my desk, so my posture's a little bad like that, and so my like my shoulder started hurting. I'm like, usually it takes a few hours for that to start happening, and I looked and I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, no, one of the nice side effects of not looking myself is like I don't look at the clock either.
Mm.
And because dude, I am militaristic about it. I don't even want the other person to see me glancing at the clock. I literally don't, um, especially if the conversation is open ended. But I agree with you. I do want you to have a rest of your Saturday as well.
But no, I agree. The different ways that people think, it's just it's so strange because you don't usually think to talk about it and think to discuss it because it's so obvious that everyone's brain works the same as mine, right? They just come to different conclusions. But surely what's going on inside is the same. But no, everyone's
No,
got their own weird system.
dude, it's like basically a jumble of neurons that gets trained from scratch and has some like bootloader code, but like a
Yeah,
lot of it is like just trained over time.
yeah.
Oh,
Nobody
and
nobody tells you.
we could just talk. Hopefully, if I'm doing this still at the end of this year, we'll just talk in a year, and that'll just be a snapshot for yourself.
That sounds great. Yeah, you got to send me the recording of this though. That's
Oh,
the
this
key.
is gonna be published online for the world to
Oh,
see. So
that's true.
you'll get the recording. Yeah.
You know my way. If you've been noticing me looking at your LinkedIn profile, I keep forgetting what the name of the podcast is. And the only way I have to find it is by going to your LinkedIn profile. And I felt somewhat self-conscious. I was like, he's gonna like,
Just go to YouTube and search for "Tell Me Stuff I Should Know."
yeah. I couldn't remember the exact sequence of words. And you can
No,
imagine that's not one of those things that you can mess up a little bit and then get
no,
results.
no. It's safer to go with the route of like, "Hey, dude, haven't seen you in forever. How's life? Hey, guy."
Yeah.
Maybe I'll tell you a story another time about how I completely broke the social contract with one of those people you're supposed to do a nod with, and
Hmm.
like uh, ducked behind a pillar, but then he found me. I'll tell you that story sometime. But thanks for doing this, Owen. This was really fun. I
Yeah.
really that flew by.
Yeah. No, thank you for engaging my my conversation.
Of course, and wish you a good rest of your weekend. Bye.
Yeah, and best of luck with your move and all of that. We didn't even do the whole catch up part. We just went straight into
Yeah, yeah, and maybe we can have an in-person conversation after vaccine, but before I move.
it. Wait, when are you moving?
Whenever I get the vaccine.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah,
fair enough.
yeah. All right. Take care.
All
Bye.
right, you too. See you.
Bye.